We're going to call the executive committee meeting to order. Your motion to adopt the agenda.
I move that approval is presented.
I'll second it.
Any discussion on the agenda? Not all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. We have some corrected minutes from December 10th meeting 2020. I'd like to move on now.
I'll move to approve.
Second.
Any discussion on the minutes? Not all in favor?
Aye.
Carries. Anyone has any conflicts, let us know when we get to that item. Are there any public comments?
There's no one in the West Conference room, Mr. Chair.
And I don't see any other committee members not seated on the committee here, so we'll say we'll get more information. Now we'll turn it over to the county administrator for reappointment.
Yes, Mr. Pritchard's term is up for the Wisconsin Inspiring and Facilitating Library Success Board of Trustees. He's been on it, I think, the last 5 years. It's a 5-year appointment, as long as he's a county board member. And he would like to continue in that capacity, and I would recommend that.
All right, anyone have any comments on it?
You need a move for approval then?
No, it'll come to county board.
Yeah, okay, we'll take it to the board. But I guess you guys would say if you recommend or.
I hope we could send it.
I would move that we recommend. I think will be unanimous.
All right, we're going to say that the committee recommends and no one has any opposition. All right, we have an update, some discussion on the Centerpiece Sports Ag Complex potential.
I think, the sports ag complex, yeah. I was thinking of the fairgrounds. Been talking with people. First of all, I wanted to thank the board for their openness to consider that. Since then, of the people who have contacted me, whether they be citizens, community leader, they like the idea. I haven't had anybody come in and say, hey, whoa, what are you thinking about? What we have done is met with the staff. We've kind of put together the initial start of a communication plan. I'm drafting a letter now that will go out to the towns, villages, and cities, to the leaders. I've had a discussion with Terry Howard, the EDC, and I'll be meeting with their board of directors next week. And then we're going to include this and ask participation. I think we can get better participation in our municipality roundtable that we do about once a quarter. We'll set one up. We'll bring people in. The idea being, let's get people aware of it. Let's get their input, ideas, concerns up front. And then our next step is to get someone to partner with us in terms of a company that does the feasibility studies, an assessment of the county, and what the biggest needs are. And at that time, we'll develop our action plan to say, here's the steps. And it'll start out general because this will take, more than a year to obviously put this together. So we'll start putting the steps together. But that's the plan at this point.
All right, any discussion, questions, comments?
I got a question, Chair. So what's the thought of, this idea here? Like, obviously, first we need to say as a county, what do we want to be, what do we want this sports/ag complex to be, right? What do we want in it?
Mm-hmm.
Are you going to look to the county board supervisors to give you that input, or are you and staff going to come up with that? Because if you're going to hire a consultant, right, you can say, hey, like to hire you to come in and do an evaluation. One is you're going to have to pick a site, or you're going to have to at least not pick a site. You're first going to have to say it needs to be this big, right? Before you go pick a site, you're going to say, I need a piece of property this big to put this on. But to know how big a piece of property is, you need to know how big of a building and how many pieces are going. How are you going to come up with that?
I think they will, when we hire somebody to do an assessment, they will ask us for what are your priorities, what is it you want to accomplish. That will be created with board members. Board members. They will then do an assessment as to what's the demand, what's the needs, tie it to our goals, and then they will bring information to us. Staff won't say, here's what we're going to do. The consultant won't say, here's what we're going to do, but rather they will give us, here are the statistics, here's the data, based on your goals. I would suspect the location, it would look something like, based on locations, here are the top 3 options we've found, and here's the pros and cons of each, and then the board will decide. It would be my guess, as far as where it would be. And through the committee, they may say, or the consultant may say, based on our study, based on what's around other counties, what the demand is, what is available elsewhere, they may say, here's a real gap that you should provide. Maybe it's an equestrian stable or a year-round program. If there's a demand here, they'd say, we'd recommend this. Then they may say, if you're going to do sports for young people, here are the sports. They'll look at facilities, like how many swimming pools are there, how many hockey rinks are there, and what's the demands for those sports. That will enable us to narrow it down, because we can't be everything, right? So they'd say, here are the ones of biggest needs, and then we'll decide how much space we need, and so on. So I look at this as a cooperative joint project. And that's why every committee is going to be involved. The consultant that we would eventually contract with will be here on a regular basis to make sure, touching base, are we going in the right direction? But it all comes down to what we as a group put down as our goals, objectives, and priorities. So to give you an example, if they say, we think it should be located in Clam Falls, in the very northeast section of the county. They'd say, well, based on the goals, if you want it available for the entire county, is sticking it up in the corner the best option? Well, maybe it is if
Probably not. I'm just saying, probably not.
They'll say,
I agree.
they'd say population, transportation, is there access?
My biggest concern is just, personally, is when we hire these outside consultants, and I've seen it before, sure, they're professionals, sure, they know their business, they know how to put packages together, but if we're going to truly make this successful, I think it has to be about the locals. It can't be about some consultant dream saying, oh, this would be, we've done this before over here, and we've done this before over here. Even though I know there are a lot of smart people, it's no different than tool design coming in here and telling us how to redo our building, right? So they said we need to move our boardroom. There's no supervisors that want to move the boardroom. Very few, right? That was my sense. So I just worry sometimes we get too far down the line with a consultant or with a firm before the people speak. And that's all I want to just throw that out there.
I think that's fair. And I think, as you know, we're not moving the boardroom until the board.
Oh, no, I know, but they spent time, they put the plan, they put the presentation together, they kind of walked us through, all the county board said is, okay, yeah, we know we need new mechanicals, right? And we know we need a little remodeling being done. But a company then came in and told us, well, this is what you guys need to do. And I know the building's different, but I just hate to waste our time for months having a consultant tell us what we need. I mean, we're elected officials. I think we personally, just the thought, is we should tell the consultant before they even get here what we want.
And I think a good consultant will ask us that.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Point
Yeah.
taken.
Just
That's the vision of,
I build houses for people, and every person says they want a house, but I've never built the same one twice, and so I worry that, you know, there's some builders out there that build tract homes, right? And it's the same one. You go to a tract home, and every third house is the same house. And I just worry a little bit that we hire some big firm from Milwaukee or Minneapolis, or, you know, there's no firm like that in Polk County. So clearly they don't know Polk County. Whoever we hire is not going to be from Polk County. And I would almost personally like to see us supervisors, and maybe they'll do that exercise with us, but I would certainly like to hear every supervisor say, here's what I think we're missing in our community, right? I would like that opportunity to say, here's the list that I think we should put in. And then when the consultant gets hired, say, here's what we're telling you we want. This is what we want in our house. Before you get too far and start telling me what I want, let me tell you what I want. And maybe that's part of the process. So,
it will be.
okay.
I mean,
I would say too, I think up front, we need to know, at least have a clue early on as to how big the land has to be. I mean, do we need 40 acres? Do we need 80, 120? Because all of a sudden that either keeps somebody in or out. You know, if it's a village looking at trying to get it and we need 80 acres, do they have 80 acres available for it? Well, if they don't, maybe they're out right from the start.
yeah,
You know, it's no use getting to the end and then saying, oh, we need 120 acres for this. And, oh, yeah, we don't have anybody who wants to give up 120 acres.
And you know, and I just go back, Administrator and Mo knows, I went to all those meetings with the Fair Society. They told us, hey, this is what we want, right? We sat there for months designing a plan for what they wanted, what they thought was a great idea, building a grandstand, making this polling tractor. We spent money, the board approved spending money to do the design work, and then next thing you know, they're like, yeah, we don't need that anymore. And I feel like I wasted 6 months of my life and my time going to meetings. And then at the end, they go, oh yeah, we're out. And we designed it, we spent the money on it, and it wasn't really what everyone, I don't know.
I'm glad you brought that up. I mean, we're going to do all those things.
Okay.
We're in the very early stages, and like I said, everybody's going to be involved.
Yep.
You brought up the fairgrounds, and I'd like to throw out the idea, somebody needs to consider, is this
Are we
something?
on 9 now?
Oh, no,
Okay.
no, we're still on the same thing, but I think we should consider, before we invest a lot more money in the fairgrounds, let's make sure that that's where the fairgrounds are going to be, or do we combine that with this new concept, this new complex? Because if we're going to invest $1.5 million or whatever in the fairgrounds that was built 100 and some years ago and is surrounded and has trouble having programs, and they wanted grandstands, and now only be used a very limited number of nights in a year, are we better off including that in a centerpiece complex that could be used by multiple organizations or people or private businesses throughout the year?
Right.
And I guess my recommendation is consider, do we want to invest that $1.5 million now and then move the fair? Or are we better off saying, let's limit what we spend there, and if we don't need to spend it there, we can invest that in this other project? Might be a good start.
All right, any other comments? Let's talk about the fair then.
I had a comment on that. Question for, do you have any idea how much a consultant, that we would invest in a consultant?
I don't have pricing yet. I don't have, right now I've looked and I've actually talked to one firm just to, excuse me, bounce off ideas. It was in the very early stages. But there are companies that design these in Wisconsin, in other states, all around the country.
That's what I'd like.
Yeah, they're everywhere. The largest one in the U.S., I think, like an amateur sports complex, and I don't think ours is going to be like it. It's the one in Blaine. But the company that consulted and said, here's what will work here, is now the company that manages that. And they have a business that they go out and consult to other people, other communities or cities or whatever that say we want to do that. So there are several out there. So we'll have a very intense and thorough process to evaluate these people, in which supervisors will be involved and say, here's the idea, here's what we think we need. And then they go out and do the data to say, here's what you got. And we decide what we want to do. Everyone's different.
I agree with basically the basic questions that Nellie had was to get as much grassroots from our supervisors to tell them, because we're the only ones that know, talking to our people, villages around, we know our tax base, those type of things, that's what's going to determine what we're going to be. I think the same thing he touched on. I think our supervisors was a little bit shocked about changing our whole format of our building. I think most of the people agree with the mechanical part and those things. And we're in a really crisis, living in a crisis situation now with people out of work and our economy and things. And I can see the presentation, but maybe it's something that as supervisors and our constituents should be more involved in. There's people out there that we're living in a different situation now than we were probably 20. We got people around us, that have retired, that have came out here, and young people with ideas, and we got a whole lot more local, good, great resources than we used to have.
All right, get us to the fair.
Yep.
Was I going to do that? I think,
I can just give you a brief,
yeah.
Mr. Chairman. What I've heard from the Fair Society is right now their CUP is going in front of St. Croix's Planning Commission either the 3rd or 4th Tuesday of January. Right now they're at the city's timeline on that. So they're waiting for that to go through at the moment as they work on the MOU to see how the CUP is going to go. But that's the only update I have from the fair.
So do you have a copy of their application for the CUP, what they're actually applying for?
No, I don't.
Can you
I'll
get a
reach out.
copy?
Yeah, I'll reach out and get one for you.
It'd be nice to see what they're doing and send it to us before next meeting. I'd like to see it. And their application to the city. I think it'd be good to see what they're, because is it true that they did pull their track pulling off of their CUP? Are you aware of that?
Understanding is they pulled an NTPA event off of that, kept their pulling during the fairgrounds, but they did remove the NTPA official pull out of it, is my understanding.
And would that change the scope of work that we've been working on the whole time by them pulling that event? Because weren't we designing the grandstands and the track for that specific event?
For the safety-wise, length and runout was for a full NTPA registered event. It could change the size of the track naturally, if they're going to still do pulling there, you would see some modifications then.
So it is true that we did all this work, we did all this design for that NTPA, and now they are not proposing it any longer. Is that correct?
Yes, what I got from the fair that they want to look at that and maybe change what they originally wanted. Yes.
Interesting.
I just think we need to put, I'll say, kind of all of this on hold. I mean, one thing, we don't know if there's going to be a fair in 2021 even. $1.5 million, $2 million for a grandstand is a boatload of money. And I think it all needs to just sit on hold until the county decides what it's going to do moving forward. If there is going to, or if there is or isn't going to be a complex, is the fair going to be or not be part of that complex? I don't see how we justify spending that kind of money for 4 days when, if they've already pulled the NTPA tractor pull off of the conditional use permit, and those things. And yeah, I think it's too big of an investment to make with not knowing beforehand, is the fair moving or not? I mean, apparently the city of St. Croix Falls isn't overly excited about keeping the fair. And I think all of those things need to be hashed out before the fair if the fair can get their CUP, I don't care, but before we spend any money on it, before they move forward, my concern is if if we end up going another year without a fair, what happens to the fair after that? Is it really a fair? Not saying that it won't be. It might be bigger than ever. But what happens to the fair? I mean, we've taken a year off. I think that's going to have a huge effect on the amount of exhibitors you see at the fair through 4-H and one thing and another. And I think before that kind of money is spent, we need to know that the fair is up and running at a good pace again, and that it is staying in St. Croix Falls. And if St. Croix Falls doesn't want them to do all of these things, then don't spend the money on a grandstand and then move the fair 5 years from now. And there was $2 million standing there as a monument.
Can't afford a white elephant.
Yeah,
I have one question. So are you currently under, this may be Administrator Mo, are we still spending money on design, or is the original resolution that we said we're going this direction with the Fair Society, is there any action that needs to be taken to say, hey, put it on hold? Do we need to have action to stop spending money on the fair until everything is shook out, or is it just a discussion and you guys just say, yeah, we're not going to spend any money? I'm just, because don't we have a current resolution in place?
Yeah, we have a current resolution in place to continue on with the design portion of it for the drawings. But I've indicated to the Cedar Court that everything's on hold to stop work on everything until the CUP and the MOU is, and we're on board again. So they're not doing any more work on it currently.
Is the board okay with just, you guys saying that's where it is? Do you need some authorization to say?
I don't think so, because this committee was put in charge of it, and this committee previously gave direction that everything is contingent on the MOU getting put in place. So I think we're operating under that directive
So
from this committee.
If the MOU gets put in place, we're not in charge of MOUs, right? Our committee, we don't.
We're going to bring it to you before
Okay.
we finalize and sign
Okay,
it.
so this MOU, we're going to sign off on this MOU, and you're going to, or basically get a blessing of the board on this one.
It's too big of a one to
Okay.
just
Yeah.
say, here, this is, yeah.
Yeah, before we move forward from this stage at all, we're going to get permission
Sure.
for that next stage to make sure everyone's on board on what that next stage
So,
is.
so are we spending any money at the, for example, in our last budget, we said, hey, don't spend any more money on the recycling center and buy a truck, right? But we're like, hey, let's just wait till we get this shook out. are you currently spending any money in other places at the fair that you would maybe hesitate? Let's say this ag complex thing gets kicked around. You know, are we going to still keep spending money on something that possibly someday is going to get sold or given to somebody or whatever happens with it? Are we still spending money there?
Currently in the CIP is the replacement of the admin roof for $30,000.
Just a rough job.
The roof job's at the fair.
That's
Yeah,
kind
we
of been
kicked it
our
down at that point.
policy now is let's stop.
Sure.
Unless it involves safety or,
Sure.
you know, protecting our
A maintenance
assets,
thing
that
or
type
something
of-
breaks.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that's all we're doing then.
Seems to be prudent.
All right. What do we have on a discussion and possible action regarding a review process and policy on resolutions that have significant impact on staff time and department budgets? Who's going to lead us in that?
Yeah, I think this was a topic that has been brought up because the nature of our work as a supervisor will say, hey, I want to do this, I want to do that, and which is what we do, right? But there was a question of should we assess how much staff time is it going to take? Because it's easy to say, I recommend we do this on CAPOs, as an example. We could work on CAPOs every day, all day, you know, finding more information, more studies, because we've got such a passionate base of people on both sides. And so we said, if we're going to do that kind of stuff, we should make it clear how much time and money it's going to cost. And the time of staff is money. The challenge is if you do that, what we can find are there unintended consequences, in my mind. And that is, you may do it for one topic that seems to make sense, like CAPOs, but then every other topic that comes up, we will be having our staff do work to assess how many hours, how much time, who's involved, and you just slow things down more. So one option that I threw out to some people is rather than say we're going to do a full bore analysis, maybe when as an option, maybe when I sign a resolution, I just sign it. I've read it. It's going to the board. We're going to say, maybe I just put a little check box underneath it. Is it minimal, marginal, extreme, you know, or a lot? Because I really don't want our staff doing a study on how much time and energy it's going to take to do another study. I mean, it just kind of doubles the time it takes. Unless there's there's always exceptions. And in some cases, we need to say, whoa, Mr. Administrator, to do this, how much time is it going to take? We all saw what happened in environmental services during the CAPO debate was our permits got backed up. And because they couldn't do their regular job with any efficiency, it was taking so much time. So those extreme cases we need to take a look at. I mean, that's just kind of the topic as I understood it.
Sounds like Chad don't want to do it. It sounds like Chad went to your office and said, hey, Administrator, settle down here. I'm just guessing.
No, in my defense, I said I'd do it. I just said be aware there will be. And the other thing that would be with that is, and this is something Vince and I discussed, that would slow down the resolution process because you're going to have to give us lead time. So you wouldn't be able to pass a resolution at a committee in, say, November and have it on the board agenda for November because we'd need that lead time to evaluate.
What about like the box idea is fine. I would think, but what if it did click a box where it was, this is extreme. So if it was the administrator's opinion or position after talking with staff, like, yeah, this is going to be a big one. Well, when the administrator made that decision that this was going to be a big deal, it'd be up to the administrator and Chad, right, to decide, hey, this one, it rises to that level, right? I mean, you guys know, hey, this is going to bury us, right? There's no way we can do it, and it's going to slow down everything. It's just, how's that trigger going to work? I mean, you don't want to leave it up to supervisors to say, oh, that ain't going to be no big deal.
Well, I think that's where I think that's why you have an administrator to say, look, if you want a really in-depth air quality study, let's say that, we estimate that that's going to be a significant amount of staff time and resources. We have all these other things in the hopper that we're presently working on. At this time, I don't think staff can handle it. I'm going to push it back here because we got to get these other things done first. That's the reason the board has an administrator, is to triage those things for you guys.
I kind of feel like the idea is good, and that's what we do. When a resolution gets introduced, we have a staff meeting, we look at each other and go, can we do this? How are we going to do it? And if it's something that's going to be extreme, we say, okay, what can we move aside? And then I would come to the board and say, we can do this, but it's going to take a lot of time. It's going to take putting some other things on the back burner. If it's a marginal thing, I'm not going to talk to you about it. It's like, yeah, we'll squeeze it in. That's part of our job. Think about the COVID, the pandemic. A resolution to give me authority to take necessary steps to get us, through certain things. That would take forever for me to do an analysis of what all it's going to take, and it would be inaccurate. On the other hand, we look at each other and go, we got to do it. We don't have an option, So I guess what I'm asking is, I don't want this to become another administrative, bureaucratic roadblock or speed bump. But I do want you to know that we look at those things, and I feel like I have the permission from you to come in and say, this is going to take a lot of time, and it's going to sacrifice our efficiencies in other areas.
Well, for example, we've had a nuisance ordinance. John and I support a nuisance ordinance. That's a year and a half ago, I think it probably was, when we first passed it. It might be pushing 2 years. And that resolution got passed by the board. Well, the Health and Human Services Committee seems to be bogged down with CAFO issues
And water quality.
for over a year. Well, there's a resolution sitting out there. Well, staff is buried with the COVID issue. Clearly, that distracted everyone this year. But, a committee where, say, a supervisor just keeps wanting to keep throwing stuff on an agenda, it clearly takes your guys' time up. And all I was hoping for is, if you need an additional tools, we don't want to do something that makes it harder for you, right? I'd rather buy you a new tool so you get your job done faster than doing it the old way. So if staff, Dana's tool was the county can only juggle one ball at a time. I don't know how many times I heard Dana say that. Hey, this is too much work. We'll get this done, and when this is done, then we'll go to that. And he just made a natural delay by saying, that. And sometimes I'm sure it's a hard job for the administrator to say, no, you're not getting this. No, you're not getting that. Maybe it ain't I don't know if it's, but all I think we were looking at is giving you tools. So, we don't run down this hole again of what happened last year with the CAFO issue. And our committee developed with staff, but we developed the MO or the conditional use resolution in 15 minutes, where environmental services worked on it for a year, Health and Human Services worked on a year, and they didn't produce nothing that got voted on at the county board. And they wasted a year. Not wasted, because a lot of good information came out. And we did put a CUP in place. And we do have a zoning thing, and we got a level of township and now county to make sure a swine cable comes in. We've got a process there. So something good came out of it. But I look at how much time staff spent, and then it comes to the executive committee, and we passed the resolution, it got passed by the board, and it was over.
Let's look at my human services committee. I mean, I think you people all know I got 2 people on there that I think between one or the other, they're talking to staff almost daily. And they're bent on water quality, that we should have a county-wide water quality and pay for it, that everybody, that's their goal, correct? And I'm saying, hey, that's water quality. Look at how we progressed. Like from 1990, see, we done a complete county survey in 1990, and that's what they're going by. And since 1990 and 2020, there's atrazine is gone, and a lot of our chemicals and fertilizers and everything are environmental friendly. The difference between no-till and our old way of farming, pollen and everything, is just daylight and dark. It's pretty much eliminated runoff and everything. And if you look at the new well tests that are coming from to environmental committee, the whole county is a lot better off. We have our watershed. We have the Wabagassa watershed.
Try not to lose us.
Pardon?
Try not to lose us. You're losing me. I don't know about the rest of you guys.
I'm trying to, my point is,
Yep.
there's so many things that the water quality has improved. It's not a crisis anymore like they're saying it
Yeah,
is.
but the point is, John, is that I understand that, but we need to get back to, so we need a policy on how do we deal with those issues? How much time are we gonna have staff spend on them? That's what we kind of need a policy, or we need something to put the brakes on something that's running a runaway.
Yeah.
We need to be able to slow that down. We need to say, staff, what's it gonna take to get this done, and how much is it gonna cost us? And do we wanna pursue it?
We're trying to tell these people that, hey, you don't go directly to the staff. You work all this through our committee. If our committee contacts
Or the
the staff.
board, or the board, if
The
the
board.
board wants the committee to be spending that much time on, the committee shouldn't be just making stuff up to have something to do with a
Exactly.
reason to meet.
That,
And I think to Vince's point a little bit ago, where staff at the environmental service end of things got bogged down. Jason said at our last meeting last week, I think at one point last year, zoning was 120 permits behind because of the overworkload of everything else. And once zoning's 120 permits behind, we as taxpayers are losing tax base from the standpoint of Chris isn't building a house, the next guy isn't building a house, somebody's not getting their sewer put in, all of those things. And when we get into that excessive cost and time, that's what happens. Unfortunately, the job in this case that zoning had kept getting pushed to the back burner, which meant the citizens of the county were getting pushed to the back burner.
are they getting caught up?
I think just normal amounts of behind now.
So do we have any policy in place, or how does it work? Is it just a free-for-all?
Or the administrator using the old line of one ball at a time.
And if I may,
I'm not saying,
No.
I don't want to start calling you data.
but let me give you an example. We don't have a policy in place, I think, like we're discussing. But as an administrator, and I'm learning, with the issue of water studies came up, we have a range of options. And one option was the county-wide, and we kind of looked at it and go, oh my God, that would take so much time. And my job is to say, do we have the resources to do that? So I asked Bob to put together a quick and dirty of what are the primary options, how much time and manpower it would take to do it. And that took a little time, but I used my judgment there to say, I need to show you all the difference. And as a result, they didn't go for the full county, the committee looked at it and said, oh, countywide, it's probably unreasonable, so they chose another option. So I think we're doing this policy now. If as long as I have that ability to say to you all, it's unless this full board or this full committee says do this, I'm going to use my judgment to say that's going to take too much of our time and we've got other priorities.
Why didn't something come to the county board before anybody was putting any work into it? Something come to the county board and said, does the county board want staff to do a full-blown water quality study, and how much money are we going to put to do it?
I think they were.
That's the first I've heard of it. So why would a committee or any supervisor be putting so much work into something that the rest of us don't even know what's going on? Why didn't a resolution come to start it? And then we go from there. Does the board want to pursue this? Or does one supervisor want to pursue this?
That's exactly the
Why isn't it coming? Why isn't a simple resolution wrote and coming to the county board of what someone wants to get going?
Because they can put it on agenda. So right now, we've kind of got a free-for-all agenda process, right? Anyone can put something on the agenda. We aren't doing that, right? Or, I probably, at some point, you just got to say, hey, we're not going to get to that. Or I totally agree, Russ.
There's nothing wrong with talking about it. You can put water quality on the agenda and talk about it, but to start making mandates on staff and how thorough a study you're going to do and how much time it's going to take.
Why does a committee have the authority? Why does one committee have the authority to tell you guys to go out and go get a grant and go start doing well quality?
I don't think they do.
Why do you guys have that authority in that committee?
They haven't done that.
I thought you guys said it got approved that you guys were going to go apply for a grant.
That they're going to bring it to the board. So they followed the process, if I'm not mistaken, Malia. They followed the process. If you have an idea or resolution that you want to consider, you can get it on the committee agenda, discuss it. They did, and they said, we like this. Let's apply for a grant. Can't do that until they go to the Environmental Services Committee, and then it goes to the board. So they are following the process in that example. But that's how it starts. That's just the beginning of the sausage making, right? So, but
There's dust and water.
Yeah, and I thought I heard too that you guys approved staff to go apply for a grant.
no.
No one's working on applying for a grant.
Well, we are going to the Environmental Services Committee to ask for permission to apply for a grant, if they agree or not.
I think
But then that will not necessarily, will it? It would not come before the entire board.
So if the
Because the forestry department writes grants for the forestry department all the time. It's just part of their business. Every 2 years, they're writing this continuing grant. And they come to environmental services and say, I'm going to apply for this grant again this year.
What Eric was saying is he found there's a department in agriculture that is seized, and there's some money there that he found that you can have right. Bob, can you explain that a little bit?
Yeah, I can actually provide some context.
Okay.
Let's hold on. Let's stay focused because
This isn't on the agenda.
no, not.
I think we're back.
It's not all. We've got to stay on.
The point is,
process.
so what if the administrator marked, what was it, an extreme amount of money or time or
medium high.
whatever the top, it's going to cost a lot of time, it's going to cost a lot of money. At that point, if that box was checked, then it would have to come to the county board.
But here's where it's back to the beginning, like Russ said. Okay, so your committee talks about this water study, right? That is not normal case like you're saying the forestry. he's got a normal thing that he's always looking for grants because the programs are in place. What I'm hearing is that environmental services has got this new idea of
Health and Human Services.
Health and Human Services got this new idea of this broad testing. You guys talked about a county-wide testing, then you pared it down, one person or two. And then what you guys did in your committee is you said, well, yeah, let's do that. So now you're telling the administrator and staff to send it over to another committee or another department, not their department. So that committee is now telling another department under Brad or under their control to go do something. And now, so someone's telling staff to go work on something the board's never said we want to do. And I think our point is before you guys start doing all that work and feel like certain supervisors are sending you guys down these little paths to go check this, go work on this, go apply for this grant because I have this goal of water testing. Why does one supervisor get to tell you guys and convince a committee to tell you guys to go do a job that's not our job? It's a board. We have to speak as a board. And I think that's where I'm a little hung up on the whole process, that now environmental services is getting something. And now if they approve someone doing a grant, then what happens?
You apply for a grant.
Without the board approving that.
I don't know, does it have- does
So
it have-
this particular grant has a very short time frame. I think it's due the 15th of February.
Right.
And so at the committee, there was a discussion of, do we need to go to the full board? Or if the two committees give the thumbs up, can they apply for the grant, not requiring the county to accept the grant because of the very short time frame? And that was what was discussed.
Wait till next year.
Well,
That's my point, is why are we pushing? Now we have a timeline, so now we understand why everyone's doing it, because everyone wants to hurry up and get it in before this deadline. It just seems like,
So I just my thought is when an issue comes up, whatever that issue is, I mean, we've got 4 standing committees. Would it not be administration, corporation council, whoever, to say, that's an issue that goes to this committee? I mean, if somebody wants to talk about roads, we're going to send it to public safety and highway. If it's going to be strictly dollars, it's going to go to general government. If it's going to be mental health, it's going to end up at health and human services. And if it's a zoning issue or something under the environmental services, that's where it's going to end up. Because now it seems as though we have health and human services making a decision, but it's a decision that environmental services has to be okay with, and yet we're not going to know anything about it until the 19th or 20th or whenever our board meeting is. And so from that committee standpoint, it'd be nice, I'll say, if that supervisor had brought it through us instead of a committee saying, we really like this idea. Now you guys have to hurry up and approve it because the deadline is 2 weeks away. And yet we as a committee haven't even heard it yet. And I think we need to do, as a county, maybe a better job of making sure that the things that get on an agenda get to the right agenda of the right committee.
I'm telling them that the whole thing is not necessary. We don't need duplications. We don't need things that are already in place.
how does it get on your agenda, John? How does this stuff get on your agenda? If you're saying this is not, as the chair, I mean, are we controlling our agendas as chairs, that if we're a chair, I've been asked to have things on the county board, presentation stuff, and I just say no. And I get my shins kicked in for doing it. But I just say no. How are things,
Like she talked to Tanya,
and Tanya puts it on the agenda?
and I didn't know that Tanya had it on the agenda, and I had a talk with her last week on the phone
Sure.
that I didn't approve of that, and it was already on the agenda. And St. Croix County has got this big grant, state grant, and I said, hey, we're going to learn a lot being we're a neighbor county. And I don't think we're in no danger in water quality. We're in pretty good shape, Bob.
All right, let's stay focused again. So what, through this discussion, are we gonna change anything? Are we gonna do anything? Are we just gonna let stuff continue to happen? What are we, where are we headed?
Well, I'm back to that. I don't think it's fair to staff that supervisors walk into this building and staff walks into this building with us, and you guys are waiting to see, oh, what are we going to get told today to start doing today, right? You already know what you got to do today. And I just feel like there needs to be something, as the chair of the board, we need some mechanism in place that everyone doesn't show up today and figure out you got a new job today to do. And we should, like Russ, I believe, you know, if we're going to start telling staff to do something, the board should be the ones telling staff to do something.
Well, what about as an idea, if when we get these things and it starts to be apparent that, you know, we're going to be spinning our wheels on things. For example, just as an example, the CAFO operations ordinance. We drafted it at the request of a supervisor, but now there's a lot of research and scientific data that needs to be collected in order to get a particular part of that ordinance done. The board hasn't told us to keep working on this ordinance. So when we've got it drafted, at least in part, but shouldn't something like that, that's just to finalize the language in the ordinance, is going to take additional significant staff time, take that issue back to the board, not to approve or disapprove or disapprove the ordinance itself, but do you want us to continue spending staff time to work on this and get that direction from the full county board in cases like that? Because a lot of these issues, like nuisance, like CAFOs, like water quality, they are, you know, sort of spanning two departments, the health department and environmental services department. And so it really is, you know, functioning in two committees, which is already about 2/3 of the full county board. Shouldn't those issues that kind of span double committees come back to the county board to say, hey, do you want us to keep working on this?
And, go ahead, Russ.
So do we need a policy update, or do we need something to make that happen?
No, I don't think so.
How do we make it
I think
happen?
if you guys like that idea, then the administrator and the county board chair can work together with the rest of the leadership team to say, yeah, this is one of those things that needs to go back to county board and say, do you want us to keep working on this? Because we're spending an awful lot of time on it. And I think as the executive committee, that's the kind of thumbs up that we would appreciate.
The chair doesn't approve environment, or the chair doesn't approve any agendas. I mean, obviously the county board agenda, but what's on health and human services, and that things like Supervisor Olson says, things that maybe should have been in environmental services, and an environmental services division is going to every health and human service meeting now with staff and sitting in those. Well, you would think that if you're sitting in those, it should be in environmental services, not, I mean, that's your committee. Health and Human Service Committee isn't your committee, but there's staff going there. I don't have no control over that. So it's not me working with the administrator in that situation where, you know, I don't know, that I get it on the county board. We can say, hey, this needs to run through a committee first, and I've had to say that a few times. This isn't going to come to the county board until your committee asks for it to come to the county board, right? I'm not going to put this on. I'm not going to put this speaker on. We're not going to do a presentation unless the committee has a resolution or request the whole county board to see it. One supervisor isn't going to get me to give them that opportunity at a county board to do it. But it seems like it does happen in committees.
I don't have a problem with something being in two committees. I mean, if it's in environmental services and health and human services, because I get there's a certain amount of things that are crossover issues regardless of what the committees might be. But then I would hope that it's on both of those committees' agendas at the same time. We're now, when we meet on the 19th as environmental services, or the 20th, we're going to be handed this from health and human services and say, you have to make a decision today. Well, you know, are we going to apply for the grant? Aren't we going to apply for the grant? But it's the first time as a committee we're going to have heard anything about it. And I just think if it is that crossover issue between whatever committees, then it should be on both of those agendas simultaneously so that both committees are looking at it at the same time. And if there's agreement, well, then it's pretty easy to just move forward with it. Because now we have no idea. It isn't apparently the whole county that we're going to look at. So what portion of the county is it? I just think if it's a crossover issue and it needs to be on both committees, then it should be at the same time. But having said that, I think staff needs to prioritize where that issue should be at and put it on that agenda. I mean, I don't care who the supervisor is that has an idea, but get it to the right, I don't think environmental services probably shouldn't be discussing, mental health issues or things that are absolutely health and human services related.
You have something, John?
I think agree with Administrator Fry. I think he pretty much set up the agenda. I don't think he had much input from the county chair.
On the what? On the committees?
On the committees and on
Data,
the
too.
general county board budget.
Yeah, and his style was, and I know it was a problem, but the administrator would come here, and it was his way of putting a delay in the process to slow things down. Was he didn't let anyone else be here. No staff directors were here, no staff employees were here, and not that we want to go back to that, but he was very good at going, all right, I'll talk to staff about your ideas, and then next month we'd be talking. He goes, well, I haven't got it all worked out yet. And then next month, yeah, I did talk to him. I mean, he was good at it.
Pretty good.
He had a nice way of delaying things that he knew.
Nice and not so nice.
Yes. Oh yeah, we had a lot of problems with that. So I'm not saying Vince that. You know what we're saying.
Yeah, and I guess as the example of this, I mean, just because one committee, I'm not saying it's done right, but just because one committee says, we'd like to do this, we'd like to apply for this grant, they send it to the Environmental Services Committee, you don't have to say yes. I mean that's...
Right. I'm just saying it would have been nice for our committee to know a little bit about what was going on before we have to say yes or no. And we're going to apparently have to say yes or no on the day that we find out about it. So
this Supervisor Olson isn't like a topic like, if it was on our work plan that you guys had on your work plan, water quality, it's been on there all year, you're working on water quality, we all know it, we read the minutes, we know that's on our work plans, and then all of a sudden, this ain't on the work plan. CAFO's and operational ordinance was on the work plan. This is another piece to support something that you have a long-term goal on is regulating CAFOs. So that's why it popped up. It didn't pop up because, hey, we've been working on this plan for 6 months, and here's finally where we worked through it through a committee. This just popped up. Hey, let's do this because I need some data to support another issue I'm working on. I'm assuming that's what happened. No?
That wasn't said.
Oh, but isn't, okay. I think it has been said, but,
Not in the committee.
okay.
We asked what the goal was. The response was to improve water quality or to assess the water quality.
And it just popped up in one meeting? They've had water quality on their work plan for months?
Yeah, we have.
Yeah, I mean,
Okay.
yeah, well, we did ask the question, what is the goal of this water study? Why is it you want to do it?
Sure.
And the answer was given was something to the effect.
To update our previous water study, which was done back in 1990.
So it was staff recommending doing this?
No,
You guys came and brought this to the committee?
we've been going for 4 or 5 months, the Health and Human Services.
Sure.
They've been asking about information about the quality of ground and surface water. And naturally, land and water would be that resource.
Sure.
And they've brought in specialists from other agencies, and they've been just educating themselves, and it's evolved into this project.
But I think, I will say for me, there becomes the problem. Bob just said they've been at Health and Human Services 4 or 5 months. If you look back on their agendas, they have been, and it's land and water that's going to be doing whatever it is, Health and Human Services is asking to be done. But that's under the division of a completely separate committee. So, I mean, we have, I don't ever remember, I mean, maybe once we've had another division come into environmental services and give us information. How many times does somebody outside of public safety and highway come to that committee, to give updates? And so I look at it, and now we're taking that time and those dollars away again, and we're sending that staff, if it's Bob and whoever, over to a different division to work on an environmental services issue. I don't have a problem with the idea coming from a different committee, but I think that before 4 or 5 months are up, it should get back to the committee where it's somewhat based.
Makes sense then to address that, since if each of the committee chairs for the committees that you're ahead of, so Health and Human Services, Environmental Services, if each month, kind of like supervisor reports, what are the topics in your committee? And it could be as simple as we talk this, we got a resolution that's going to be discussed this. And that would give everybody the opportunity to say, okay, should that be looped into our committee? Or that seems like that should be in a different, because I think one of the responsibilities of this committee was to, in times of uncertainty, direct which committees took on which topic.
We could try something where maybe resolutions do come here to get directed to committees, rather than expect the administrator to make that call and then we just challenge where he sent it.
The trouble is, like here now, in the water quality end of things, there's no resolution. It's been nothing but discussion for 4, 5, 6 months. So there's no resolution sitting out there saying,
Was there a lot of staff time utilized to generate this discussion?
On the water, it was your assessment that I asked you to do to say, what are the options of a water study?
Where we broke it down in material costs, labor costs, and staff hours.
But how much time did you spend doing that?
Put together the matrix of options. 8 to 10 hours.
And then 4 or 5 months of going to, like Brad said, another committee. You've been going 4 or 5 months to committee with you and your staff time, sitting in committees, discussing, probably going back and analyzing what was discussed and what you need to be prepared for next meeting. So
We were tasked at every meeting, at subsequent to each meeting, we were tasked with a different thing, and it just evolved into.
And does the committee task you, or does the administrator task you to do that? Who's tasking you to do the job? That's what I guess I have a problem with, is that supervisors are tasking people, for example, this whole issue. We said, hey, we'd like Chad to do an analysis of how much time a resolution is going to take. We spent a little bit of time, and now you guys have come back and said, hey, before we start going down this rabbit hole, we want you to consider what the impact is, right? So that's why we're talking about it today. But after today, we're over it, right?
And it's,
We're not going to keep every month. Chad, can you give us an update on your thought on how you're going to do your analysis?
I don't have a problem with the time that Bob has spent on this analysis and that kind of thing. I guess my problem is that it's all been done in a different committee, that environmental services has to okay all of that work. So if we say no, and we're not interested in what Health and Human Services wants to do, then all of that time is wasted. Because it never came to the committee that at the end of the day has the say to say, yes, apply for the grant. When the forester comes to us and says, we're going to apply, I want to apply for this grant, he's coming to the committee that oversees the forestry department. And it's a yes or a no, but nobody other than the forester, no other committee, no other staff members have necessarily spent any time on it. We're here, Health and Human Services could have spent all of this committee time and staff time, and Environmental Services says, yeah, we disagree with this policy, this, we want to go down a different road with this. Then it's all a waste, where it could have been at Environmental Services a month after it was at Health and Human Services. Maybe could have stayed in both committees, but Health and Human Services would have known, yeah, Environmental Services is not interested in the way you're going. Here's where they want to go. And that's where I think we have staff from one department spending too much time at a committee meeting of another department.
I agree 100%.
And I don't know where them last couple issues on Health and Human Services Committee, I don't know where, why staff from Environmental Services Division is continually at Health and Human Services. I don't have a problem with it. Yep, here's an idea we have in Health and Human Services. Staff goes, gives a presentation, and then it comes back to Environmental Services, and they say, here's what Health and Human Services would like to do.
What we really should probably have here, that what we should be talking about is that should be on the agenda. If there's an issue like that, that should be on the executive board agenda, because we do settle like disputes between committees and mediate it. And so someone should have brought that as soon as they were made aware of it. They should have came to executive. It's like, where should this be? Or should it just be a county board?
So maybe it's as simple as an idea by a supervisor comes forward to come to a committee, and the administrator or staff, whoever says, this is one of those crossover issues. This is water quality. Could be at Environmental Services, could be at Health and Human Services.
Could be at general government, it could have
Yeah,
$20.
they simply come to this committee and say, here's the issue a supervisor has brought forward. They want it on, this committee, but it's a crossover issue. Where does this committee feel as though that issue should be? And then that's where it goes. Not that it can't ever be talked about in another committee.
Well, for example, Vince, at the end, her point was, and she brought it out plain at the end of towards the end of her meeting, she wanted to bring the finalize of the CAFO to the county board on next Tuesday. And I said, hey, this isn't on our agenda. And I said, we need a lot more information outside of this committee, right? And so I wouldn't allow that.
So Vince, would anything like that help you if, if people want things put on agendas and, just the supervisor, I don't know, or that you would direct your staff that don't just take a phone call from a supervisor and have them make you put something on an agenda that could go on 3 different, could be general governments, if it's money, could be anywhere, but not to just let a supervisor call and say, get that put on the agenda.
That's happening.
It would have to be run through a minimum of you, and if you felt that this is going to require staff time, this is going to take money, this needs to maybe get to the board to see if they want this pursued or not. That
Or
one
at least the
person.
executive committee to
Well, if it needs to be directed to a certain committee, I'd say it would come here, but if it's something that's gonna require a significant amount of staff time and resources, let the county board decide if it's gonna get done, not each one of us individual supervisors.
And I think that's where this committee could either then make that decision or kick it back to the county board and say, this is big enough that the whole county board needs to decide. This isn't a matter of, does this issue go to one committee or another? This is bigger than that, then it just goes to the county board.
Could someone walk us through exactly, just take last month's, and we'll just, since you had it, or this committee, how did that agenda, or how does any agenda generally get put together through a committee? How are agendas getting put together? Is it the director, you, is it a supervisor, Lisa?
I can maybe address that.
Yeah,
At the end of each month, we go through our committee agendas and all the information that's supposed to be moved to the next agenda. There's also standard, things that are just on the next agenda. As topics come up or are presented to us, generally by the division heads or administrator, those items will be added to the agenda as we go, and then the draft is sent. We have a calendar with the deadlines as far as things need to be added, to get it to our office. And then we send out the draft to the chairman and administrator or division heads that are affected by the committees and for approval or changes or whatever. So that's currently.
before that agenda actually says this is the final agenda, do you look for an actual box check saying it's approved? Is there a like, oh yeah, Vince signed off on the agenda?
No, nobody, no. At a
No one
certain
approves
point,
it, it just
yeah,
gets developed.
Yep. On the deadline, if we don't have it by the day we have to send it out in order to notice the agenda, then we just send it out with the information we have.
Sure.
I'll just say from our end now, and just being here for a couple months, I mean, I get it from Bob, and then we'll talk and say, we forgot to put this on. Let's move this somewhere else in the agenda because it's going to take longer. But for our committee, at least in environmental services, typically we have a fair number of things that just keep rotating on it until they disappear.
For the outside items, let's say the new idea that comes forward, the process has been, my experience is, they might call me, they might call Lisa, they might call the chairman of the committee. But what we try to do is if it comes to me, and it's like I'm not on this, I said, you better talk to the chairman. So I may say, that's something Russ would have to approve. You wouldn't put it on this committee's agenda. Or I might put it on the agenda if I think it's appropriate. The other things, though, when they call staff and say, put this on the agenda, they don't put it on the agenda. They may call me and say, hey, we need to put this on the agenda. And I usually, might defer to them. But the thing that happens most, and I think this is what happened with the water quality study, was at the end of the previous month's meeting, they said, let's talk about this. So it was put on the agenda then.
Sure, the committee.
Right. And I think that's when I said to Bob, this is one of those things where we need to give them an idea that they may want to do a water quality study, but there's a range of challenges and costs.
It just seems like this particular issue, the worst one this year is the CAFO issue, Russ. And, we ended the moratorium, we passed the CUP to address this, right? And in the resolution, it says, hey, you can keep working on these issues or looking into them. Well, then staff sent off the operational ordinance to DADCAP. So we did that. The county did. The county sent that off to DADCAP. They got a thing back saying this isn't going to fly, this operation ordinance. So, we did what they asked. A couple of supervisors asked for that to be amended. We did it. And it just seems like we're going back down the road again of going to spend the whole year talking about CAFOs and water quality and well testing around ag. And it seems like we're going back after the farmers again in this one committee, or a couple people are.
They are.
Or one particular one is. And the point is are we going to let the county get bogged down in CAFO issues again? you know, because we already settled it. It's settled, it's done. And, you know, we got trail issues, we've got meth epidemic, we got a nuisance ordinance. I mean, we got a lot of other issues that we got, and that's what's, it's hard to watch as the chair, watching certain employees and certain committees getting bogged down on stuff that is already resolved. And John, I know you feel the same way. And
I didn't know.
yeah, but it's tough. It's going to keep happening. And,
All right, let's, we got 12 minutes and we're not gonna run over today. That was kind of bad we did last time. I think we were on a critical subject. But let's, somehow, either we keep discussing this or that we kind of try to get a handle on how we're utilizing our staff and the demands we're putting on. So maybe we just
keep this on our
keep it on and
agenda.
keep talking about it and try to figure it out. Because even grants are taxpayers' dollars. It's not free money.
Chasing down grants and getting them right.
All right, we got a couple things. We want to get into a discussion regarding divisional government responsibilities, or do we want to get into discussion on establishing an ag farm business ad hoc committee?
I think that's more important.
Yeah, I think we kind of covered 11 on the way through.
Yes.
All right. So in our remaining 10 minutes, then let's talk about that. And if we need anything on the work plan, try to get that in at the same time. So who's leading us on the ag farm business ad hoc committee discussion?
John, you want to do that?
Well, so about 3 years ago when we went to this divisional government, we eliminated the ag committee. And the ag committee has been in Polk County since the start of government. And on the ag committee, there was five of us people on the ag committee all the time voting, and there was always 2 farm advisors. I think the last 2 was Marlon Bottleson and what was the other guy from Amory. And so we need to get some kind of voice back to our Polk County government from the ag community and the business community. And I would like to see something put back together, ag business. We've got committees for the museum, we've got committees for trails, we've got committees for everything. And that seems to give us some information that we need from our constituents that the whole board can hear. So I just had that, I want to hear from some others.
So we can put it on our work plan, maybe.
On our work plan, I want to hear some grassroots of bringing back some of the ag problems and business problems.
You'd be looking at,
Advisory, ad
yeah,
hoc.
but I mean, some farmers, some say a nutritionist, an agronomist,
Yeah,
somebody
I'd
from
say
the
like,
co-op maybe.
maybe one of them, like Craig Gustafson from Federated or Amory or,
Would be an idea. I think what I've understood, Russ, and I've talked to a lot of people about this idea too. I've had phone calls on it. And the sense is that the ag community would like there to be just that representation to where when we had big ag issues, that we would have an ad hoc committee that, again, we could kick something to an ad hoc committee that, you know, you guys, this is your business, you give us some input. So we have agricultural represented that way. So I guess I just like to make sure it's on the work plan. We're not going to get it resolved today, but that we would put it on our work plan
That we continue to discuss.
and we could come up with some development of an ad hoc
like
committee.
years ago, just for example, years ago, the lime quarry was under the environmental committee, the land and water, and so it was on an ag channel. And all of a sudden, Dr. Fry come along with this 4-person government, and it got shifted over to Mo and the highway department. Mo is probably as good a highway or better the commissioner we got in the state of Wisconsin, and everything got shifted on to him, and people, I think those things are way overloaded. That should have stayed in the environmental department, land and water and ag, it all goes together. And we didn't have anything to say about that. And, you know,
Fix that.
I didn't know a lot about business either, and this come along, we didn't have a long chance to study. Russ was always more business person. I said, Russ, what do you think about this? And he said, well, looks like we should try it. But now we got, you know, Fry wasn't here. Now it got shifted over to him. And sure, there's some flaws, but we got to admit that there's some flaws, and we got to straighten them out. And I think we can do that. But if we don't put it on the agenda and bring it to this, so the work plan is fine.
And maybe here's a good example. I would recommend that it's on our work plan. It should be on environmental services work plan at the same time. We have the chair sitting here. It's exactly what we just talked about.
That's where it ends up, really, is environmental.
And maybe that's our committee. Maybe it should be on our work plan. Maybe we should make a recommendation now that it's put on their work plan. That might make more sense.
It makes a lot of sense.
Yeah,
Wouldn't you agree?
Yeah, I'm fine with that, because at the end of the day, there again, it's gonna end up at our committee.
Yeah.
You know,
I'll make a recommendation that we send that ag farming business ad hoc committee. It might come back to us, but let's send it over to environmental services and let them deal with it.
yeah, that's fine.
All right, we'll say we have a consensus in the committee to do that.
I'd second that.
Well, it's really not even a motion, it's just
Yeah.
a consensus.
Just a consensus.
It's in the minutes.
Yeah.
In the minutes.
All right, geez, with 5 minutes remaining, we can talk about, the division of government responsibilities, if someone's got just a brief update on it.
I think this falls right into that, Mr. Chairman.
I would say let's leave the divisional government thing until we get it really hashed out. Let's leave it on our work plan then. Let's put that on our work plan. And let's-
I think we need to look at those 4, Bob and Mo and Tanya and Chad, and see how each one of those 4 divisions, where we can make sure, we all know we need to make improvements.
But I think that's where it needs to stay on, but at the same point,
That's in our committee.
it's where they as division heads could also say this belongs in my committee more than it does over there, along with the administration, to make sure that it got into the right division once the idea was brought up.
Right.
You know.
All right, anything we want to put on our, says finalize our 2021 work plan, but I don't think we ever finalized it. I think we just add to it.
So one of the things on the work plan, I asked a couple months ago, and this again was Chad, was, and maybe it's general government because it's a funding thing, but I'll just throw it out there, is I really wanted to keep, you know, one of our things on our top topic was drug abuse, right? And the meth epidemic. And I know that we've had some pretty major meth busts here recently again. It's still, it's out of control. It's totally out of control in our community, and we're not talking about it much. And I would like to keep it on our work plan, because what I'd like to do is have the topic as meth then. And for talking points, I was asking to say, what does it cost our county to deal with the meth epidemic that we are currently under? And I know it's hard to shoot from the hip, but I don't need to talk about it today, but I'd like that to be a specific line item in our work plan is, what is the meth epidemic costing Polk County? And to keep talking about that, or do we send that to Health and Human Services, or where should it be?
Public work.
And just a suggestion, because you did it with environmental services, and here just a second ago regarding the ag committee. Maybe that's one that should be on everybody's work plan during the same month because that is a multi-discipline issue. That could be exact because it's an overarching philosophy of the county. I think public safety is important, and I think health and human services because there's a lot of stuff that are doing on it. So maybe that's one that, like environmental services and executive, should be on all three committees. I would just suggest that.
But then I think it's good, like you said, Chad, to keep it, I mean, it runs on every committee and it runs on every committee until it's done.
Yeah, until we
You
get.
know, so that everybody is, maybe not everybody discusses it the same month, but it stays on all of the agendas until,
You look at how much staff we spent on COVID this year and how we've called it an epidemic, right? And we spent hundreds of thousands of dollars on it. What do we spend on meth? It's an epidemic, and we don't talk about it. And so I just want to find a way that we need to talk about our problems. We need to talk about how we fix our problems.
What I can do is I can come up with a proposal for the administrator to address like the three different areas and get them on each person's work plan, and maybe three
Okay.
times a year. I'll get that to Vince because it really does affect three different areas. But I can work on that.
I would like to see that, just a report on public protection and health and human services.
Yes, sir.
We're
I'll
involved in both. Mr. Chair, I want to thank you. I think this is one of the broadest, openest meetings that we've had. I think you did a great job. Move for adjourn.
I'll second that.
All those in favor?
Aye.
We'll stand adjourned at 9:58.
Yeah, way to go, Arcan.